I suddenly woke up, choking violently as if rising from deep water. My chest burned painfully, my vision blurred by the glaring hospital lights. Tubes covered my body, machines beeped frantically, nurses rushed in, eyes wide with shock. Mr. Zohan, a nurse gasped. Oh my God, he's awake! I could hear shouting, footsteps echoing down the hall as doctors flooded into the room. Yet amid the chaos, only one voice echoed clearly in my mind. Zohan, honey, drive slowly. Please, I'm scared. That night, 2 years ago, Almira's voice had trembled in fear beside me. I remembered clearly how she'd clutched my arm as I sped down the rainy highway, desperately trying to reason with her. We'd been arguing about money, my will. She'd insisted we put everything under her name. For convenience, she'd called it. My lawyer had warned me beforehand, whispering caution. Are you sure Almira is someone you can trust blindly? I had foolishly laughed at him then, blindly confident in the love Almira and I shared. You don't understand, Almira would never betray me, I'd insisted. But moments later, headlights had pierced through the darkness. Tires screeched, glass shattered, and the last thing I'd seen was Almira's wide, terrified eyes. Now, lying here, my body trembling with weakness, memories flooded back relentlessly. I had nearly died, lost 2 precious years of my life, and for what? I heard muffled voices outside my room. Almira's familiar voice floated in, cold and indifferent. 2 years in a coma. Doctor, let's just be practical. What chance does he really have of waking up? The sooner we unplug him, the quicker our family can heal. Heal? She was talking about me as if I were already dead. Another voice replied, Miss Almira, Zohan left a substantial will, but it can only be executed after a certified medical declaration of his death or irreversible brain damage. I recognized that voice instantly, my cousin Farhan, the man I had grown up treating like a brother. Yet here he was, plotting with my fiancé about my death and my fortune. Almira sighed impatiently, frustration evident in her tone. I don't care. My lawyer said 2 years is enough. The sooner Zohan's wealth is transferred, the better for everyone. Her words were colder than ice, slicing deeply into the heart that once beat solely for her. 2 years ago, I had nearly died to protect her, but today she was willing to pull the plug herself. I closed my eyes, pretending once more to be lifeless. Pain surged in my chest, but not from my injuries. It was the pain of betrayal, and in that moment, I made a vow. I'd show Almira exactly how wrong she was. My name is Zohan. 2 years ago, if anyone asked about my life, they'd probably envy me. At just 28, I was CEO of my family's booming real estate business, respected by everyone in S City. My life was something most people only dream about: money, status, and, above all, a woman I thought loved me unconditionally, Almira. I still vividly remember the night I met Almira. It was a summer evening at a charity gala hosted by S City's elite. She entered the ballroom dressed in a sleek red gown, her beauty mesmerizing everyone present. Her raven black hair cascaded like silk around her delicate shoulders, and her sharp, confident eyes sparkled like rare diamonds. Almira was an aspiring actress back then, fresh from drama school, ambitious and full of dreams. She stood in a quiet corner, awkwardly tugging at the hem of her dress, clearly out of place among the city's elite. I approached her, smiling gently, extending a hand. You seem a little lost. Can I help? Her eyes lit up, embarrassment replaced by surprise and relief. Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting anyone to notice me here. I noticed you from the moment you walked in, I confessed openly, captivated by her innocence and vulnerability. Almira blushed, lowering her gaze shyly. It was love at first sight, or so I believed. We spent hours that night talking about our dreams, our ambitions. Almira told me about her desire to become a famous actress and build her own career rather than relying on family connections. I admired her courage and independence, promising her my full support. Our relationship quickly blossomed. Almira was charming, affectionate, and vibrant, always full of life and excitement. She brought warmth and passion into my overly structured existence. Within months, we moved in together, and I introduced her proudly to my family. However, my parents and siblings never approved. My mother always warned me, "Be careful, Zohan. I don't trust Almira. She's not as innocent as she seems." I brushed off their warnings. Almira was my everything. I indulged her every whim, financing her acting classes, supporting her auditions, and using my connections to secure her opportunities. To Almira, I was both lover and patron, constantly paving the way for her success. But after our engagement, cracks began to appear. Almira became increasingly dissatisfied. Her acting career hadn't taken off as she'd expected, and her frustration grew day by day. Arguments became more frequent. She blamed me for her failures, accusing me of secretly hindering her career, to keep her dependent. I patiently tolerated her accusations, blaming myself for not doing enough. One evening, exhausted from work, I returned home late. Almira stood in the living room, tears streaming down her face, clutching a torn contract. "What's wrong?" I asked anxiously, reaching for her, but she violently pushed me away. "You sabotaged me again, didn't you?" Almira screamed. This film was my big chance. They suddenly dropped me, saying my boyfriend didn't approve. I stared at her, stunned. "Almira, why would I do that? You know I'd never hurt you." But she refused to listen. "I regret meeting you. You've destroyed my dreams." Her harsh words pierced my heart, but still I tried reasoning with her. "Almira, I promise I'll fix this, whatever it takes." For the first time, I saw true hatred in her eyes. "I don't need your pity. If you truly loved me, you'd give me independence, not trap me like some trophy." That night, she packed her bags and left. Yet, foolishly in love, I chased after her. I offered her everything I had, my money, my status, even my self-respect. Eventually, we reconciled, but Almira had changed. She became distant, secretive, yet more demanding than ever. I kept trying, thinking my love could fix everything. Months later, we announced our engagement publicly. Almira, basking in media attention, finally got her big acting break. She was thrilled, thanking me sweetly in public, though privately she continued treating me coldly. Then came the night of the accident, the night Almira shattered what was left of my heart. We were driving home after another heated argument. Almira had discovered that I'd delayed signing a new will, one leaving most of my fortune directly to her upon marriage. She exploded in anger, accusing me of never trusting her, of playing games with her future. "You're selfish, Zohan. After everything I've sacrificed for you, you still doubt my intentions? Is this your love?" Angry and hurt, I drove faster, ignoring her screams to slow down. I never saw the truck approaching at full speed. The crash was devastating. In my 2-year coma, everything changed. Almira went from struggling actress to an emerging starlet, using sympathy from my tragedy to boost her career. My family's fortune grew exponentially while I lay unconscious, becoming even more tempting to Almira. Yet, lying motionless in that hospital bed, I realized how naive I'd been. Almira never loved me. She loved my wealth and connections. Her tears, promises, even her passion, all fake. Her heart was cold, calculating, driven only by ambition. Now, 2 years later, awake but pretending otherwise, I clearly saw who Almira was. She plotted openly with my family, negotiating my death as if it were a business deal. Listening to them fight over my fortune, the last traces of love in my heart turned cold, replaced by calm indifference. Almira's betrayal had shattered my heart, but it had also awakened something stronger within me, resolve. This was my second chance, a chance to rewrite my fate. This time, I wouldn't let Almira or anyone else control my life. From this moment on, I promised myself one thing. I would reclaim everything I'd lost. 2 weeks had passed since I woke up from the coma, but I continued pretending to be unconscious. Every day, Almira visited my hospital room, wearing a mask of fake grief, sighing dramatically in front of doctors and nurses. "Oh, Zohan, please wake up," she whispered softly, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I don't want your money. I just want you back. I could barely suppress the disgust boiling inside me. Just moments earlier, I'd overheard her speaking to my lawyer outside the room, anxiously inquiring how soon they could finalize my will and transfer my assets. She believed she'd soon inherit my fortune, becoming the sole heir of the wealth I built through years of relentless hard work. Her voice echoed clearly, heartlessly. The sooner Zohan dies, the sooner we can all enjoy the inheritance. Let's end this charade already. The silence afterward was deafening. Elmira stood frozen, her face drained of all color, realizing she'd lost everything. Jack fell back into a chair, his hands shaking, realizing the depth of his betrayal had been exposed. I looked at them both, disgust filling my heart. You've underestimated me for the last time. With that, I turned, my back on Elmira and Jack, signaling security to escort them out. As their desperate shouts echoed down the hall, I felt no remorse, only resolve. This betrayal was just the beginning. From now on, I vowed to reclaim my life, and those who hurt me would pay the price. After confronting Elmira and Jack, I thought reclaiming my life would be straightforward. But instead, each night that followed was filled with nightmares, haunting images of Elmira's betrayal, Jack's greedy smirk, and the family I'd once trusted plotting my demise. No matter how hard I tried to remain composed, my heart throbbed painfully whenever memories surfaced. The first few nights after waking were the hardest. Alone in my luxurious yet empty mansion, the silence was suffocating. Every corner held memories of Elmira, her laughter, the scent of her perfume, the echo of promises she'd whispered sweetly into my ear. It was as if the walls themselves mocked me, reminding me relentlessly of the happiness I'd once believed real. Why, Elmira? I whispered bitterly into the darkness. Was my love really worth nothing? The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. The trauma from the accident lingered. Every time I moved, it felt as if shards of glass pierced my bones, a constant reminder of the night that had stolen 2 years of my life. Doctors had advised me to rest, but sleep evaded me, replaced by tormenting questions. One evening, unable to endure the solitude any longer, I drove aimlessly through S City. Everything had changed dramatically in 2 years. New buildings rose from places I once frequented, and familiar streets felt foreign now. But more painfully, I saw Elmira everywhere. Billboards promoting her newest drama series, magazine covers praising her beauty, TV screens showcasing her tears as she recounted our tragic love story. Every sight of her success twisted the knife deeper into my heart. One evening, as rain poured heavily outside, I found myself parked in front of the small cafe Elmira and I used to frequent. A familiar ache tugged at my chest. Inside, couples laughed together, oblivious to the broken man sitting alone in the shadows. I gripped the steering wheel, memories flooding relentlessly. Zohan, promise me you'll always love me. Elmira had whispered here once, her head resting on my shoulder. I'd nodded earnestly, completely lost in her affection, yet now her soft voice was replaced by cold echoes. The sooner Zohan dies, the sooner we can enjoy the inheritance. The conflicting emotions made my head spin. Had Elmira ever truly loved me, or had I been a pawn from the very beginning? My phone buzzed, startling me out of my thoughts. The caller ID showed my mother's number, someone who'd barely visited since my awakening. Zohan, she began cautiously when I picked up, her tone hesitant. Can you come over tomorrow? Your father and I need to discuss something important. I agreed quietly, though I dreaded seeing them again. My family had once been my strongest support, but now their presence felt oppressive, a constant reminder of betrayal. The next day, seated across from my parents, the atmosphere was unbearably tense. My father's gaze was stern. My mother seemed hesitant, yet determined. Zohan, you've misunderstood, she began carefully. We were only thinking practically. Elmira assured us that inheriting your fortune quickly would ensure it wouldn't be misused by outsiders. Out of love, my father added stiffly, avoiding my gaze. I laughed bitterly, unable to hide my disgust. Love? You call plotting my death love? My mother winced, her eyes filling with regretful tears. We made mistakes, Zohan, but Almira promised she'd use the money to support you if you woke up. We were foolish, blinded by greed. Please forgive us. Their words rang hollow, fueling my anger rather than soothing it. I don't want your explanations, I said coldly, my voice trembling slightly. I just want to understand. Did any of you ever truly love me? Neither answered. Their silence was deafening, confirming my worst fears. I rose abruptly, turning away. Zohan, wait! My father called desperately. You're misunderstanding. Almira lied to us too. I paused, turning to him slowly, my voice cold. Did she force you to sign those papers? Did she threaten you to take my money? There. Silence answered clearly enough. With disgust, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. In my car, I drove aimlessly again, tears burning my eyes. My family's betrayal hurt worse than Almira's. She had been an outsider, but my parents, people, who raised me, who'd watched me grow, how could they abandon me for greed? That night, unable to sleep, I went through old belongings. Photos of happier times caught my attention, pictures of Almira smiling warmly beside me, Jack laughing, and my parents glowing with pride. How had everything fallen apart so drastically? A knock on the door startled me. Opening it cautiously, I found Almira standing outside, soaked from the rain, shivering, her eyes filled with desperate regret. Please, Zohan, she whispered, shivering violently, soaked to the bone. Hear me out. I made mistakes, horrible ones. But I swear deep down I always loved you. For a brief moment I hesitated, recalling the warmth her smile once gave me. But reality quickly extinguished any sympathy. My eyes turned cold, my voice cutting through the rain. Loved? You mean when you plotted my death, Almira? She shook her head frantically, tears mixing with rain on her pale face. No, Zohan. Please listen. Jack was behind everything. I didn't know about... I interrupted harshly, stepping closer. Stop lying. You were always a brilliant actress. But I'm done being your fool. Tell Jack and my parents that my inheritance, everything I earned, is out of their reach now. You'll never see a cent of my money. I slammed the door, ignoring her desperate cries. Inside, my heart ached, torn between rage and sorrow. I knew she'd return. She wouldn't give up easily. But this was no longer about love. It was war. The people I'd trusted most had turned into enemies, eager to devour what belonged to me. Now, I would have to fight back, not just for revenge, but for my dignity, my pride, and my future. From today onward, Zohan was no longer a puppet, trapped by love or manipulated by family. I'd make sure every person who betrayed me experienced the same pain, the pain of losing everything they once held dear. Days turned into weeks, yet Almira refused to relent. Her attempts grew bolder, each one more desperate than the last. My refusal only seemed to fuel her obsession, yet the more fiercely she pursued me, the colder my heart became. Then, one quiet afternoon, while I was organizing documents in my home study, my phone vibrated sharply. An unknown number appeared on the screen. Hesitating briefly, I answered. A deep, authoritative voice greeted me immediately. Mr. Zohan, this is Detective Miles from the S City Police Department. Can you come down to the station immediately? Chill crawled down my spine. What's this about? The officer paused, his voice suddenly somber. It's about Almira. She's accused you of attempted murder. My mind went blank, and my pulse quickened. Almira was now resorting to framing me? How much further would she go? I'll be right there, I replied calmly, hiding the panic racing through my veins. At the police station, officers eyed me warily, whispering among themselves. Detective Miles, a stern-looking man, ushered me into an interrogation room, setting a stack of photographs and papers on the table. Almira claims you tampered with her car brakes, he explained, his eyes scrutinizing me intensely. She narrowly escaped a deadly accident last night. Do you have anything to say? I stared at the images. Almira's luxury car smashed into a concrete barrier, airbags deployed, blood smeared across the seats. Yet I knew instantly. This was another of Almira's schemes. I didn't do this, I replied firmly, maintaining my composure. She's framing me. The officer frowned, clearly doubtful. We have security footage of someone resembling you near her residence around midnight. Witnesses placed you near her vehicle earlier that day. My heart raced. She had meticulously planned this. Almira had finally played her most dangerous card, framing me with calculated precision. Anger surged through me. She was determined to destroy my life completely. Check again, I insisted, fighting to stay calm. I was home the entire night. My security system can prove it. The officer leaned forward, skepticism etched across his face. We'll verify your alibi, but until then, don't leave town. They allowed me to leave temporarily, but the weight of Almira's accusation crushed me. My reputation, painstakingly built over years of honest work, was teetering on the brink of collapse. My thoughts spiraled as I returned home, paranoia clawing at my senses. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. I hesitated before answering, expecting another disaster. Instead, a soothing voice spoke softly. Zohan, it's Sara. Relief washed over me. Sara, my trusted nurse, had become the only person I trusted lately. Her sincerity had never wavered, and her warmth felt like a rare shelter amidst the storm. Sara, my voice cracked, betraying my exhaustion. Things are falling apart. Almira, I know. She interrupted gently, her voice steady. Listen, I've found something critical. Meet me tonight. It might just clear your name. Hope flickered faintly within me, and I quickly agreed. That night, Sara arrived, cautiously handing me a small USB. This, she whispered urgently, is security footage from the hospital. Almira bribed a nurse to falsify your medical records. It shows she tried to euthanize you multiple times while you were in the coma, Zohan. She even paid doctors to remove your life support. My blood froze. Almira hadn't just betrayed me. She had attempted to end my life outright. I felt numb, unable to process such cruelty from someone I had once loved so deeply. Sara's voice softened as she continued. She must have panicked when you woke up and decided framing you was her only option. You have to fight back, Zohan. You can't let her destroy you. I clenched the evidence tightly. Gratitude swelled within me toward Sara, someone who genuinely believed in me without any hidden agenda. Why are you helping me? I finally asked quietly, searching her eyes. You barely know me. Sara hesitated, her cheeks reddening slightly before meeting my gaze with quiet resolve. Because I've watched you silently endure suffering since the day you woke up. I believe you deserve justice. Everyone deserves someone who believes in them. Her sincerity pierced through my hardened heart. At that moment, I finally understood the difference between Almira's selfish obsession and Sara's selfless kindness. Yet, the fight wasn't over. Armed with Sara's evidence, I confronted Almira at her apartment that very night. Her confidence crumbled instantly when she saw me holding the undeniable proof of her crime. You thought I wouldn't find out? I demanded coldly, tossing the USB onto her table. Almira paled visibly, realizing her schemes had collapsed. Zohan, she whispered, voice trembling, desperation flaring in her eyes. Please, I had no choice. I stared at her, feeling nothing but exhaustion. No choice? You tried to kill me, Almira. How many times did you pretend to mourn at my bedside waiting for me to die? Was money worth more than my life? Tears streamed down her face, her voice turning shrill. I never wanted it this way. Jack forced me into this. He said we'd both benefit, but everything spiraled out of control. You weren't supposed to. Wake up, I shook my head bitterly. And that's your excuse? That my survival was inconvenient? She stumbled toward me, falling to her knees. I'm begging you, Zohan. If this goes public, my career, my life, it'll all be over. Please forgive me. My fist clenched tightly, yet seeing her kneeling didn't soften me. It only filled me with disgust. Your career? I scoffed. You nearly cost me my life. Your obsession destroyed everything we had. This isn't love. It's insanity. Almira's sobs echoed hollowly in the silence. Zohan, I loved you. I still love you. No, I interrupted, voice cold and final. What you felt was never love. It was greed, obsession, desperation, but never love. Turning away, I walked toward the door, knowing this battle was far from over. Elmira had lost, but at what cost to my life? As I stepped outside, I felt the weight of the truth pressing on my shoulders. My family, my love, my trust, everything had shattered. Elmira had unleashed a storm from which there was no turning back. But I wouldn't fall again. I'd survived her betrayal once. I would survive this too. My hands trembled slightly as I stood at the entrance of the courthouse. Today, everything would be revealed. The truth I'd long waited for, and justice I'd fought so hard to achieve. It had taken weeks to gather every piece of evidence Sara had provided. And finally, the moment of reckoning had arrived. I straightened my suit, trying to mask the anxiety in my heart. Beside me, Sara gently squeezed my arm, silently reassuring me. "Everything will be okay, Zohan," she whispered, her voice firm yet gentle. I nodded slowly, meeting her eyes with gratitude. "Thanks, Sara. I don't know how I'd manage without you." Inside the courtroom, tension was palpable. Elmira sat on one side with her high-priced lawyers, eyes rimmed red yet defiant, refusing to meet my gaze. Jack sat close to her, smirking arrogantly as though confident he'd escape justice once again. Even my parents were there, seated nervously behind them, avoiding my eyes. As the proceedings began, Elmira's lawyer stood, confidently laying out their fabricated narrative. That I was jealous, bitter, vengeful. The courtroom murmured with whispers of doubt and sympathy for Elmira, who had crafted her image so carefully over the years. But I was calm. My lawyer rose slowly, addressing the judge with a composed, unshakable voice. "Your Honor, the defense has portrayed Zohan as obsessive, driven by jealousy and malice. But I submit evidence to the contrary, irrefutable proof that Miss Elmira not only attempted to kill Zohan 2 years ago, but actively conspired with Jack and other members of Zohan's own family to seize his fortune." A shocked hush fell over the courtroom. Elmira paled instantly, panic briefly flashing in her eyes before she masked it again, forcing a look of injured innocence. "Objection!" Elmira's lawyer jumped up. "These accusations are baseless and slanderous." The judge's voice was firm, demanding silence. "Proceed, counselor. Present your evidence." My lawyer nodded, quickly displaying the security footage on a large screen. Gasps echoed through the room as everyone watched Elmira, clearly recognizable, bribing the hospital nurse. There was footage of Jack visiting my hospital room secretly, confirming their betrayal. Yet the most damning evidence came next, a video. Elmira herself had secretly recorded, one that she'd kept to blackmail Jack, which Sara had recovered during our investigation. On the screen, Elmira's voice echoed coldly. "Jack, if Zohan wakes up, everything is over. He has to stay in a coma, or better yet, die quietly. Don't mess this up again." Jack's voice responded harshly. "Relax, he won't last long anyway. I increased his medication again today. Just a few more days, Elmira, and the money is ours." Gasps filled the courtroom. Elmira's carefully maintained facade shattered. Her lips trembled, and she turned to Jack in disbelief. "You," Elmira stammered. "You promised you'd delete that." Jack scoffed bitterly, eyes filled with resentment. "You betrayed me first. You planned to pin everything on me if things went wrong. I was just protecting myself." Chaos erupted in the courtroom. My family, once proud and dignified, now shrank in their seats, ashamed. My mother quietly sobbed, and my father looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The judge slammed his gavel repeatedly, attempting to restore order. "Silence," the judge commanded. "This evidence clearly demonstrates an intent to commit murder and conspiracy. Elmira, Jack, do you have anything to say?" Elmira, frantic, stood abruptly, desperation etched across her features. She spun toward me, eyes pleading, tears streaming uncontrollably. "Zohan, please forgive me," she cried, rushing forward until restrained by court officers. "I never meant to hurt you. I swear. I was manipulated by Jack, by everyone. You're the only man I've ever truly loved. Please believe me." Jack laughed bitterly, mocking her openly now. Stop pretending, Elmira. You only loved his money. You used me just like you used him. Elmira turned furiously, losing all composure. You ruined everything, Jack. I would have had everything, the fortune, the career, and even Zohan. But your pathetic greed destroyed us. The courtroom watched, stunned, as the two conspirators publicly turned on each other. My parents sat silently, faces pale with shame and guilt. Then Elmira turned again toward me, desperation taking over her anger. Zohan, remember us. Remember our love. I was wrong, I admit it. Please, just tell me you forgive me, even once. Her sobbing voice stirred something deep within me. For a brief moment, I remembered the young Elmira I once loved passionately, the girl who laughed innocently, who'd held my hand under starlit skies and whispered endless promises of forever. Yet now, seeing her before me, utterly broken and desperate, all I felt was emptiness. You never understood, Elmira, I said coldly, my voice firm and clear. I gave you everything, my heart, my trust, my dreams. But you saw only weakness. Now you expect forgiveness? You were willing to kill me for my fortune. How could you ever think I'd forgive that? Elmira collapsed back into her seat, sobbing, uncontrollably, finally understanding the gravity of her actions. The judge's voice cut sharply through the silence. Given the evidence presented, Elmira and Jack will be detained pending further investigation. Their crimes will be thoroughly examined and prosecuted accordingly. I stood, feeling no satisfaction in their punishment, only a bitter sense of justice finally served. Yet the confrontation wasn't over. My eyes fell on my parents, still sitting in shock. Slowly, I approached them. Zohan, my mother began, tearfully. We didn't know. Elmira deceived us. I shook my head slowly, disappointment heavier than anger. No, Mother. You chose to believe her lies because they suited you. You saw me as a burden and a bank account, never as a son. Even after I woke up, you never showed remorse, only fear for your reputation. My father tried to speak, but words failed him, his expression filled with regret. I took a deep breath, heart heavy yet resolute. From now on, you're no longer my family. My inheritance, the wealth you all coveted so much, will go entirely to charity. I'll start over, free from your greed. My mother and father's faces paled further, realizing they'd lost everything. Not just the fortune, but their son, too. Finally, turning toward Sara, I gently took her hand, intertwining our fingers. Her eyes widened briefly in surprise before warmth filled them. Zohan, Sara whispered softly, squeezing my hand reassuringly. Are you sure? I smiled gently, nodding. You stood by me when everyone else abandoned me. You taught me what true loyalty means. If anyone deserves a place by my side, it's you. Her cheeks flushed softly, but her gaze never wavered. Then I'll be by your side. Always. The judge finalized the sentencing, and as the courtroom emptied, I stepped out into the sunlight, taking a deep breath for the first time in years. It was finally over. Yet, as I looked up at the bright sky, my heart felt lighter. True, I had lost family, fortune, and past love, but I had gained something infinitely more precious, a genuine love built on trust and sincerity. As we walked away, I glanced back only once. Elmira stood, defeated, at the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters and cameras, desperately hiding her face, yet I felt no pity. She had made her choices, and now she would have to live with the consequences. With Sara beside me, I walked forward, away from the shadows of my past, toward the hope-filled promise of a new life, a life defined by true love, genuine loyalty, and unwavering trust. Just as we reached the end of the street, my phone vibrated gently. A text message from Elmira. Zohan, please forgive me. If I had known I'd lose you forever, I would never have chosen greed over love. Please, can you give me one last chance? My fingers hovered briefly over the reply button, but then I decisively deleted her message. It was finally time to move. On turning to Sara, I smiled warmly, whispering the words I'd once reserved only for Almira, words that now meant infinitely more because they were true. I love you. Sara smiled beautifully, her eyes shimmering with happiness. I love you too, Zohan. The past was finally behind me. My heart, once shattered by betrayal, had been mended by the sincerity and genuine love Sara offered without reservation. From this day onward, my life belonged only to those who truly valued it. My family was no longer bound by blood, but by genuine love and unwavering loyalty. Finally, after all the pain and betrayal, I'd found my true home. The months following the trial passed peacefully, like a gentle breeze after a fierce storm. Almira and Jack had received their punishment. Justice had been served. My inheritance, the fortune my family had so desperately sought, was now being channeled entirely into educational charities, building schools and hospitals in rural communities. It was a decision that had filled me with profound peace. But more importantly, I finally felt free. I'd moved away from the city, seeking a quiet life far from the drama and greed that had tainted my past. Now I lived in a comfortable, simple home near the coast with Sara and her elderly parents, who had warmly welcomed me into their family without reservation. For the first time in years, my life felt balanced, content, and whole. One afternoon, as golden sunlight spilled through our living room window, I stood silently, gazing out toward the ocean. Gentle waves lapped against the shore, and children laughed joyously as they chased each other along the beach. My heart was filled with quiet gratitude for this newfound peace. Suddenly, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. Sara stood beside me, her presence calming as always. Her soft eyes glimmered with warmth as she handed me a steaming cup of tea. Thinking about the past? She asked quietly, understanding me with just a glance. I nodded slowly, taking a sip, the warmth easing my heart. Sometimes, but only because it reminds me of how fortunate I am now. Meeting you changed everything, Sara. Her cheeks flushed lightly, and she rested her head gently against my shoulder. Zohan, you've said that countless times. But you saved me too, you know. I spent years feeling invisible, always just a caretaker, unnoticed and forgotten. You're the first person who truly saw me. Her quiet confession filled me with a deep tenderness. Setting down the cup, I turned to face her, holding both her hands in mine. Sara, you don't just deserve to be seen. You deserve to be cherished. She looked up, a shy smile blossoming on her lips. But before either of us could speak further, the door burst open with playful energy, and our small bundle of joy rushed in. Little David, adopted just weeks ago, his laughter filling the room like a melody. Daddy, Mommy, look what Grandpa taught. Me! David held up a painting, a childishly drawn portrait of our family, smiling beneath a sunny sky. Sara laughed softly, eyes bright with affection. It's beautiful, sweetheart. I picked David up, his tiny arms wrapping around my neck as he giggled happily. Daddy, did you like it? I loved it, I said warmly, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. You're already an amazing artist. David beamed proudly. His presence had filled our home with endless joy, sealing the love between me and Sara in ways words never could. Our family felt complete, bound by love and sincerity, the very things I'd spent so many years searching for. Later that evening, while we sat together on our porch, the salty ocean breeze whispering softly around us, Sara leaned into me. Her voice was soft, reflective. Zohan, do you ever wonder if Almira truly regretted her actions? I gazed thoughtfully at the ocean's endless horizon. She probably does, but regret doesn't erase consequences. She chose greed over love and paid a heavy price. Sara squeezed my hand gently. Do you ever regret meeting her? I smiled faintly, shaking my head. No, because without Almira's betrayal, I might never have realized what true love really meant. The past, painful as it was, led me to you. That's why I wouldn't change a thing. Sara's eyes softened, her lips curving into a sweet smile. Do you know how happy you make me, Zohan? I kissed her gently, tenderly brushing her hair back. If it's half as happy as you've made me, that's enough. Time continued to move forward. A year later, on a quiet spring morning, I stood at the edge of the ocean, watching Sara laughing with David as they chased each other through the sand. My heart swelled with gratitude, knowing how close I had once come to losing everything. Now I held all I ever wanted in my hands: love, family, and peace. Suddenly, my phone vibrated, pulling me from my thoughts. An unknown number, but I recognized it instantly. Almira had been released early due to declining health, her sentence commuted to medical probation. A wave of sadness, not anger, washed over me. But I felt no urge to answer or even respond. My life had moved on. I simply deleted the message without reading it. In that quiet moment, I heard Sara calling my name. Turning, I saw her standing by the shore, her face glowing with happiness. David was running toward me, waving excitedly, his bright laughter ringing like a bell. "Daddy, hurry! We're building a castle for Mommy." Chuckling softly, I joined them, kneeling beside my son as we crafted the sandy castle under the golden sun. Sara watched us lovingly, a beautiful smile playing on her lips. "Daddy, will you always be here?" David asked innocently, his eyes wide with innocence. I cupped his little face gently, smiling warmly. "Of course, David. Daddy will always be here, right beside you and Mommy." His eyes sparkled with delight. "Then, promise?" "I promise," I said softly, meaning every word. Later that evening, when the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky with vibrant shades of pink and gold, Sara wrapped herself in my arms. Her voice was gentle, filled with contentment. "I never imagined a love like this existed." "Neither did I murmured, holding her closer. "Thank you for saving me, Sara." She shook her head gently. "No, we saved each other." As the stars emerged, twinkling above like tiny beacons of hope, I knew I had finally reached my destination. Everything I'd been through, pain, betrayal, heartbreak, had brought me here. The past no longer haunted me, no longer held power over my heart. The next morning, my phone lit up again. A final message from Almira. But instead of hesitating, I deleted it without reading. I owed her nothing. She was now a chapter in my story that had been forever closed. Life moved forward, beautifully. Sara and I married quietly by the seaside, surrounded only by those who truly cared for us. David proudly carried the rings, smiling brighter than ever. When we exchanged vows, I knew with unwavering certainty I'd finally found the life I always wanted, the love I'd always dreamed of. Years later, as I sat beside Sara, now silver-haired yet still as beautiful as ever, I watched our grown children and grandchildren playing happily along the shoreline. Sara turned toward me, smiling tenderly. "Are you happy, Zohan?" she asked softly. I clasped her hand gently, whispering words I'd said countless times, but now they held even deeper meaning. "More than you'll ever know." She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder, whispering softly, "I'm glad you woke up that day." I chuckled quietly, pressing a gentle kiss against her forehead. "Me too." The sun began to set again, golden rays washing over our family, a legacy of genuine love born from overcoming pain, betrayal, and struggle. At last, peace enveloped me completely, like the warmth of an everlasting embrace. Closing my eyes, listening to the laughter of my family echoing around me, I finally felt complete. My journey had taught me a powerful lesson, that the greatest wealth was never money, power, or fame, but the sincerity of true love and unwavering trust. The past was gone. Almira, Jack, my family's greed, none of it mattered anymore. Now, only the laughter, warmth, and love of my family remained. As the sun dipped below the horizon one final time, I whispered softly, my voice filled with genuine gratitude, "I'm home." And in that peaceful moment, I knew I had found my true happiness at last.